action. Thank you guys for helping us build spirit lamps. Sharon, our hospital programs manager, is going to teach us how to build these new and improved boxy spirit lamps. Sharon, take it away. And I mean no disrespect by improved.
No problem. So I'm calling this one the mini boxy. And so these are going to be kind of squarish and lifted up on stilts. And these are open air. These do not have a roof. So to start out, I like to make a square base. And so my piece of cardboard here is 3 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. I've actually taken 2 corrugated cardboard pieces and hot glued them together, just so it's a little bit thicker and is a little bit heavier. And then let me zoom in here. There is a square drawn on there, kind of scooched in a little bit. So the square itself is 2 3/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches. And then I just poked a tiny hole in each corner of the square, because that is where your legs are going to go, your legs to your spirit house. So grab any kind of corrugated cardboard, and with your X-Acto knife, cut your square. And then the next step is you're going to get 4 bamboo skewers. Now I have found at Fred Meyer, they do make a bamboo skewer that has square edges. That is really helpful. If you can only find the regular bamboo skewers that are round, that'll work too. The square edges just help things not roll around as much. But these bamboo skewers that I have today are round. So you could use an X-Acto knife. If you are using an X-Acto knife to cut your bamboo skewers, I like to score it with the X-Acto knife and then kind of gently kind of snap it back and forth until it breaks. Another thing that I'm going to use right now to cut the bamboo skewers are wire cutters. These are actually jewelry wire cutters, but they kind of are pretty perfect. So I'm going to cut this bamboo skewer to be 7 inches long. With my pencil, I just made a little mark, and then take your wire cutters and it snaps right off. And it's a pretty clean break. I do like to have some sandpaper available to just smooth the edge. That way you don't have to worry about your recipient getting any splinters. So make 4 of those to be 7 inches long. All right, so for this next part, I just grabbed a scrap piece of paper and I'm just going to make like a little template that's going to help me get these sides to be about the same size. So I'm going to draw a line that's 7 inches tall. And I'm going to draw another parallel line that's 2 3/4 inches away. And then my next line, let me look at my notes. It's going to be 2 inches from the bottom. So this exciting diagram is 2 parallel lines that are 7 inches long, and then there's 2 inches from the bottom. This is 2 inches, and that just connects. So this is going to be your template for gluing the legs. So my next shorter cut is 2 3/4 inches long. I'm just going to sand down that edge. So I've laid these down on the paper. And with my hot glue gun, I'm just going to put a dab of glue where that little horizontal bar is. All right, so I don't know if you can see that. I'm just going to let that dry. So you've got my 3 pieces of bamboo skewers resting on that template, on that piece of paper. I'm just going to let the hot glue dry for a moment. It sets up really quickly. This little crossbar will go along the top. This is your first frame, so you're going to build one more of these. All right, a couple little more dabs of hot glue. All right, so we're going to let that dry. Whoop. All right, let's see. So as soon as that one's dry enough, so you'll remember that these legs are 2 3/4 inches apart, and our square that we drew on here is 2 3/4 inches square. So I like to keep the pointy parts on the bamboo skewers to poke into the corrugated cardboard. I can remove those later when I get done with the whole project. So because I'm 2 layers thick, it can kind of stand up by itself. So that's really helpful. I'm just going to give that a minute to dry before I touch it again, because if you go too fast, it falls apart. Haste makes mistakes, like my dad always said. So now we have the 2 frames in the cardboard base. And now we'll start to add the other little crossbars. So we have 4 more crossbars to add. So for these next crossbars, you could cut them at 2 3/4 inches or just a tiny bit longer, maybe closer to 3 inches. And then with your hot glue, just hold it in place until the hot glue sets up in a few seconds. I think it's okay if your spirit house is not exactly square, it's totally okay. Definitely the spirit house is kind of fun when it has a little bit of whimsy and a little bit of wiggle to it. So don't fret if it's not totally lining up. All right, so that's the last bamboo skewer. So I'd say this is kind of your structure now, your armature. So one of the reasons why I have the bottom crossbars 2 inches off the ground is that you want to have enough room to reach under the legs to put the little tea light inside. So it'll be kind of floating up like that. So the next thing we're going to do for the next step, we're going to build the little platform where the tea light is going to go. So for the base of the tea light, I like to use chipboard instead of corrugated cardboard. So pick what orientation you want to be resting on. You're going to be resting on those lower crossbars of the bamboo skewers. And I'm going to make a mark on mine with a pencil, kind of like that. And then I'm going to cut it away. Now I have a shape like this, and I'm going to trace this one more time so that it's 2 layers thick. So now I've got 2 of these. Before I hot glue them, I'm going to trace the tea light on one of these. So I traced my tea light, little circular shape. So So I ended up kind of cutting it like a pizza. And when I go around with scissors or an X-Acto knife, it's just a little bit easier to cut a circle shape that way. So now we have a shape like that and a shape like that. I'm going to glue this one right on top with my hot glue. So the reason why I did the little circle in the middle is just so that the tea light has a little nook, little place to rest. So now this is ready to be hot glued in. So I want to make sure that the cardboard doesn't go past the bamboo skewer. It just kind of rests right on top of the bamboo skewer. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go with that. More hot glue to put your chipboard down. All right, so that's what you should look like so far. That's going to give you your little resting platform for your tea light. Now the next phase is the cheesecloth. So I'm going to do one plane at a time. I have sometimes tried to wrap more than one plane. I don't personally like those results because I can't get it tight enough, and I really like to have a nice tight surface. So I usually do one plane at a time. If you have better success than I do, you can use one continuous piece of cheesecloth. I think the most important thing is just to be pulling it tight as you go. So you want to open this up so that you got one ply of beautiful sturdy cheesecloth. And I'm going to start at the top of one of these crossbars. So I laid one little line of hot glue on that crossbar and then just drape the cheesecloth along the top. I like to make sure I have a good connection. So once it's cooled off a little bit, you can kind of press down and make sure you have a good connection. So now I'm going to add hot glue to the bottom crossbar. So the important thing here is to be pulling tight. So it's going to be nice and dry on the top crossbar, so you can really tug on it. And so tug your cheesecloth down to the bottom crossbar where the glue is still hot and still wet. Now I'm going to hot glue the third side, the first vertical side. You want to keep holding it for a minute while that glue is still hot. Keep holding your cheesecloth so you can get it nice and tight. Because this is your last side of applying the hot glue to the cheesecloth, this is your last chance to pull it tight and get a nice strong surface. And I'm going to keep tugging on it until I see the glue is firmed up. If there's ever a spot where you see the hot glue did not reach the cheesecloth, you can always add it from the top side, like as a kind of last case scenario. All right, so. It's only attached on one side. So now I'm going to be a little seamstress, and with some good sharp scissors, I'm going to cut the cheesecloth so that it only is on that first plane. So this part is probably the fussiest part. So I do have the cheesecloth on just one side now. I'm just going to kind of check my edges, make sure it's not too sloppy. You don't have to be too precise. a lot of this will be kind of covered up once you start adding the tissue paper at the end. So there's no need to be super on the spot about it. All right, so it looks pretty good. So basically I'm going to keep repeating that on all 3 sides. So first one was at the top, second one will be at the bottom crossbar. Remember to pull it nice and tight. Now we're ready for the third side. Sometimes I tap it down with my finger. If you're worried that the glue is going to be too hot, definitely don't do it when the glue is hot. But you can always use the side of a pencil or even the side of scissors to just press that cheesecloth down into the hot glue. All right, since this is our 4th side, our cheesecloth gets tugged really firmly to get it nice and taut. All right, and now it seems dry enough, so I'm just going to trim away the excess. All right, that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to move on to the third side. I must confess, one of my crossbars just jumped ship, so I'm going to have to hot glue this again. All right, final side, side number 4. I'll start at the top since my bottom crossbar is wet right now. So one of the ways that I can tell if the glue is setting up is if I cannot see the strands in the cheesecloth, the little threads in the cheesecloth moving anymore. So it looks like that is nice and dry. So now I'm going to trim this final side. This is where I feel like a little seamstress. Okay, so that is the fussiest, most time-consuming part. So now you have your spirit house. So at this point, you don't really need the cardboard base anymore. You'll see that it's pretty sturdy now that you have cheesecloth on every side. If you want to look for any strands, especially at the top, these little threads you might want to cut away just to help it be a little bit more tidy. That looks pretty good. So sometimes, especially when we've made these up at the Children's Hospital, we don't like having the super pokey tips. So now that it's kind of all nice and stable, if you want to cut your little tips off, so you can just cut off like about, 1/4 of an inch. The wire cutters work really well with this. So that'll give you a more blunt edge. Now, in order to check and see if it's stable, rest it on a tabletop and see if any of your legs are too short or too long. So this guy's leaning a little bit. If you like a little jaunty leaning spirit house, you can do that. I'm going to cut a couple of these legs a little bit shorter. So that looks pretty level to me. And, as long as you're kind of okay with any of the little tilts or any of the little leans, that's totally fine. And if the ends are a little jaggedy, just grab your little square of sandpaper. And let's see if I can find my little tea light. Oh, thank you. So here's the little tea light. And so since this one does not have a roof, we can just rest it inside. It's not too deep. And then one of the reasons why we have that little open space on the bottom is to help you kind of put your fingers in there so you can hold it still, because a lot of these tea lights turn on by turning them. So you can either activate your tea light here and just drop it in, and it can rest in that little nook that you made. If you wanted it to be steady, you could always put a little piece of tape underneath it to just kind of temporarily hold it in place. And then the next phase to do is to get some white tissue paper and water down Elmer's glue. And so that ratio between Elmer's glue and water is pretty much about 50-50 ratio. You want to get it stirred up and mixed so that it's kind of the consistency of milk. And then with a flat paintbrush, just paint that watered down Elmer's glue on this surface of the cheesecloth. Lay a small piece of white tissue paper on top. And I usually don't do the pieces of tissue paper too large. I might do them about 1 inch by 1 inch. And then lay your piece of tissue paper nice and flat on the cheesecloth. And then with your brush, your flat paint brush, you can just kind of gently put a little bit more glue on top of that. And then you want to cover the whole surface of cheesecloth with white tissue paper. And when that dries, it'll be nice and tight. It'll have kind of like that feel of paper mache, and it will make your spirit house even sturdier. Is there anything else I should say, Scarlett?
I think that's it. Great job, Sharon.
Do you want to show the white tissue paper part, or?
Is that a part that the volunteers will be doing?
No, we wouldn't put paper on it.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Just